A 70-year-old woman vanishes without a trace.
It had been about a month since anybody had talked to her.
I even left her some messages. Can you please just call and let us know you're okay?
Her former caretaker tells police she went on a trip with friends.
She was coming back with some friends. Don't know who the people are.
Bank records showed that her card had been used at 2 different gas stations.
But a search of her home reveals the horrifying truth.
The detective went in the house. He said it reeked of incense. There were just a ton of flies.
What I see is a big mound of concrete and what looks like a human shoulder, hair.
It just absolutely broke my heart when I heard what had happened to her.
And the evidence points to a killer no one expected.
She's smart. She thought, hey, you know, I'm gonna have time to get my story straight.
Did you not kill her? Look at me. Look at me and be honest with me.
I am being honest.
You killed her, didn't you?
July 29th, 2021. It's a late summer day in rural North Carolina when Detective Tim Austin gets an unusual emergency call.
A call came into my desk that had been transferred from the communications center. Janelle Sparks is the sister-in-law of Lynn Sparks Keene, who lived in Linville Falls. She informed me that Lynn was 70 years old, had suffered from a traumatic brain injury in the past, and it had been about a month since anybody had talked to her, and she wanted somebody to go check on her.
According to Janelle, Lynn has disappeared before, but never for this long.
And the explanation from Janelle was that Lynn, she was an alcoholic in the past. She would go sometimes for a few weeks that nobody could get in touch with her. She was just that type of person. She did have a person living in her home that was helping take care of her.
Elizabeth Carserino was the live-in caretaker of Lynn Keene.
Janelle and her husband live in South Carolina, and the rest of the family lives in Florida. So it's been a blessing to have someone taking care of Lynn. But over a month ago, Elizabeth told them Lynn had unexpectedly left town.
According to Elizabeth, some friends had drove up from Louisiana, and they had partied, gotten drunk at the home, and the next morning Lynn decided that she wanted to go to Louisiana with her friends. My biggest fear was that if she had suffered from a traumatic brain injury in the past, and she's out here driving, she's consuming alcohol, she's with people, could they possibly do something to her? Could she lose control because of her age and her health concerns? We have to get everything out there that we can to try to find her. Every description of what she could be driving, who she could be with, what clothing she was wearing. So I started learning more about Lynn from her family. Time is our enemy, and we've got to work as fast as we can to try to locate her in a timely manner for her safety.
Lynn Sparks was born June 17, 1951, in Pinellas County, Florida. She and her older brother Butch were raised by a single mother.
Her mom, Wanda, was divorced from her dad, Jack. Lynn and Wanda were very, very close, almost more like sisters than mother and daughter. Lynn had a very adventurous personality. We both belonged to the swim club, so we would go and swim and carry on with all our friends.
In her early 20s, Lynn moved to the Florida Keys and worked as a bartender. There, she met Russell Keene, a businessman and father of 3.
Russell Keene was a very eccentric man. At the time that Lynn met my father-in-law, he was already in the process of going through a brutal divorce. He had all these wild and crazy ideas and aspirations, and a lot of them he put to fruition. He owned several Pizza Huts, a couple radio stations. He had a hotel down in the Turks and Caicos.
Russell was a bit older than Lynn was. She was truly in love with him.
By the time Russell's divorce was finalized, he'd lost most of his assets. So he and Lynn moved to North Carolina, where they lived in a home owned by Russell's father.
He never went back to work. He was too distraught. He felt like a failure and couldn't get past it. Lynn was the one that went waitressing at Louise's in order to make money for them to live off of. She was a trooper, but they were a pretty good, loving family, like any family with hardships.
Lynn got along well with Russell's adult children, especially his son Russ and his wife Kristen.
I remember the first time I went up to meet Lynn and Russell. It was such a warm welcome. It really was. I mean, Lynn was just such a sweet person and really kind of took me in. You know, she never had children. She kind of looked at Russ and I like her children.
But in 2001, Kristen's husband Russ was killed in the September 11th terrorist attacks.
Kind of was in a daze. And that's when mine and Lynn's relationship really started to grow. She was a sounding board for me. We all cried together a lot. It brought us closer. She was so close to my daughter. They both shared the love of reading, and they would go to the bookstore together. She's the one who got Masley her first library card. They had a very close relationship.
In 2016, the family was struck by more tragedy when Lynn's husband Russell passed away and her mother's health began to fail.
Lynn was, you know, kind of helping her out around the house, although I think it got to be a little too much for her, and that's how Elizabeth came in the picture.
Elizabeth lived across the street, and they said she was, you know, very good to Wanda, taking care of Wanda.
Lynn was like, Wanda needs more support. I can't really lift her. And Elizabeth was a strong person, so it seemed to be a good fit.
4 years later, in 2020, Wanda passed away when Lynn was 69 years old, which is when her problems with alcohol seemed to begin.
Lynn was having a really rough time. When Wanda passed, it was really hard for her. She's lost her husband, now she's lost her mother. It was tough.
When Lynn visited Kristen and her daughter in Florida that November, it became clear how bad things had gotten.
Something wakes me up at 4:45 in the morning, and I'm hearing music out on the pool deck, and I'm like, what is going on? So I open up the door, and it's Lynn, and she is, well, she's having fun. She starts walking up the stairs of the pool deck to try to come talk to me. Well, she loses her balance, and she falls. She fell over the planter, smacked her head on the pool deck, bleeding, and she's unconscious. I'm talking to 911, I'm trying to compress on her head, and they come get her. Doctor says, look, you had a brain bleed. She needed to be on supervision because she could get dizzy. She had a concussion.
When Lynn returned to North Carolina, Elizabeth Carserino moved into the house to care for her full-time in exchange for room and board.
Elizabeth understood the situation. Lynn was buying all the food, provided a house over her head. The next 6 months, Lynn was healing. She'd go to bed at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, try to sleep through what would be her drinking time. So she wouldn't do that anymore. And she got clean. When she got the all clear, I had been looking at river cruises. You know, go see new things and enjoy your life, live a little. Lynn was excited.
But now, it's been over 1 month since Kristen has heard from her mother-in-law, Lynn Keene, and North Carolina police are on their way to the house to check on her.
Myself and 3 other detectives, we loaded up in 2 different cars and rode out to Linville Falls. Janelle, Lynn's sister-in-law, had told me that there shouldn't be anybody at the home. Elizabeth had already informed them that Lynn told her to move out. I went up there, knocked and announced several times, found that the door knob, it was locked. The curtains were closed. I was told that there was a Lincoln Town car that Lynn drives, and it was not in the driveway. There was some building materials for the wheelchair ramp that was under construction. Wood and some bags of what is called sackcrete, concrete mix. Nothing appeared like there had been a breaking and entering or any kind of violent crime. This looked like a home that somebody was actively living in, that they just weren't home at that time. And I saw no reason to go inside the house. Because of her health issues and the fact that the family hasn't heard from her, I went back to the office and have her entered as a missing, endangered person.
Detective Austin also reaches out to Lynn's caretaker, Elizabeth Carserino.
I called at least 2 times trying to get in touch with Elizabeth and only got voicemail. I left my name and number and information that I needed to talk to her. She may be the last person to see Lynn. I also have 2 unknown friends, a Karen and an unknown male, and Lynn took off to Louisiana, so I'm beginning to get worried. Could something have happened to them?
Coming up, the search for Lynn Keene raises new concerns.
We were all upset with Lynn, disappointed in the fact that she fell off the wagon.
And detectives find answers buried in the dark.
I'm following my nose, and the smell of something decomposing is getting stronger the further I go.
Are you saying I did this?
I'm saying you know about it.
70-year-old Lynn Keene hasn't been heard from in over a month, and North Carolina police are unable to reach her caretaker, Elizabeth Carserino. Detectives call Lynn's daughter-in-law, Kristen Keene, to ask if she's heard from Elizabeth. She tells them Elizabeth moved out after Lynn left town.
Elizabeth Carserino had been in contact for probably a month with Kristen Keene, but Elizabeth had not contacted law enforcement. She tells Kristen, hey, I'm not at the house anymore. I'm camping with my son up in Maggie Valley.
Elizabeth said, I'll try to reach back out when I have signal, but I'm not going to be always available. Elizabeth told me some of Lynn's Barfly friends from Louisiana had popped in. They brought in alcohol, and Elizabeth said, well, I tried to tell her Lynn's not drinking anymore, and she wouldn't listen to me, and she said, I just went to bed. She goes, but the next morning when I woke up, Lynn asked me to go to the pharmacy for her and get some things, and I said, why? And she said, because I'm going to Louisiana.
She didn't know who these people were. It kind of heightened how she was feeling about it.
We were all upset with Lynn, disappointed in the fact that she fell off the wagon, and she had done so well. I even left her some messages like, Lynn, honey, I really need to talk to you to make sure you're okay. At that stage in her life, it was a lot for her to take off and just go somewhere. And we're like, what in the world is going on? None of this makes sense.
Due to the fact that Lynn mentioned traveling to Louisiana, detectives put out a bolo for her vehicle along the route from North Carolina.
On August 2nd, I was notified by the Cherokee Police Department that the car was found in Cherokee, North Carolina. They had that vehicle towed to their secure lot. They found the keys to the vehicle under the driver's seat. There was nobody in the vehicle. Nothing stood out to them other than There was a Wells Fargo bank card in the car that was in the name of Lynn Keene. There was a Social Security card as well underneath the driver's seat. That Social Security card belonging to Lynn Keene. Bank records showed that her card had been used in Marion, North Carolina, and had been used in Cherokee, North Carolina, both times to fill up for gas at 2 different gas stations. It is starting to worry me because most people would not just leave their bank card, their Social Security card, as well as their car keys all locked up inside their vehicle.
Further analysis of the traffic recordings reveals another clue.
The Cherokee Tribal Police were able to find video of Lynn's car coming through town, and it appeared to be just occupied by one person, but the video was very grainy and couldn't make it out exactly who it was. The person driving the vehicle didn't look like Lynn. They looked like a bigger body type. What's going on in my mind is, if Lynn's not there, where did she go? Where did the people go that were with Lynn?
Police had not conducted a search of Lynn's house during their initial wellness check, but now they believe there is cause to do so.
Based on this, I did apply for a search warrant. In the interim, I've received a call from Kristen that she actually had a friend go into the home.
I had a friend that was a former detective in Tennessee. I called them up. I said, find a way in. I don't care. He went in the house. He said it reeked of incense. There was, a couple items that looked like somebody had just been there. And he goes, when I went down into the basement, there were just a ton of flies. When he said flies, I just felt so sick to my stomach.
Four days after Lynn Keene was reported missing, her daughter-in-law, Kristen Keene, is informing investigators about the new concerning details in Lynn's home. But the call is interrupted by Lynn's caretaker.
Kristen told me she was getting a call waiting from Elizabeth. So I said, take the call me back, let me know what she says. Shortly after that, Kristen calls me back and tells me that Elizabeth is very angry with her.
She got really angry at me because she felt I was accusing her of doing something to Lynn. I told her, Elizabeth, I said, not for nothing. You are the last person to see Lynn, alive as we know it, because nobody's seen her since. You're going to be the first person that the police want to talk to.
Kristen says that it's just very unlike Elizabeth the way she was acting. She was acting guilty of something. What's going on in my head is I need to find Elizabeth. I need to speak with her because her story of what she has told the family is not adding up.
As their calls to Elizabeth Carserino continue to go unanswered, detectives return to Lynn's home with a search warrant.
There was nothing visual to the naked eye. I mean, everything appeared to be very tidy. There was no indicators that any kind of struggle or anything had taken place in that house.
I checked the main floor of the home, and then I see a doorway that I don't know where it goes. Well, I open this door, and immediately I'm hit with a very strong odor of something dead. There's also very large flies. And so I start making my way down the stairs of this home. Flies are everywhere. And the smell of something decomposing is getting stronger the further I go. I walk into this back room, and off in the corner I see a pile of something covered with a tarp and a box sitting on top of it. I remove the box, set it off the side, and I pull the tarp back. What I see is something, it looks like a big mound of concrete. And sitting on top of it is a bag of pre-mixed concrete mix. And the smell is just overwhelming. And I can see mixed on the edges of the concrete what looks like a human shoulder, hair. I've got a crime scene. I don't know who's in the concrete. I think it's Lynn. I immediately call for assistance from other investigators. I request the assistance of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, and I start taping off the area.
The North Carolina Bureau of Investigation sends Special Agent Maggie Holder to the crime scene. Her first challenge is how to remove the body for identification.
I was a little intimidated trying to figure out, what's the best way to do this and preserve the body to make sure that we can send the body to autopsy.
They start chiseling away at the concrete. They proved it was a human being. Could not see a face. I could see parts of arms. I could see the thighs, parts of the calf. Very decomposed. Around the neck, I can see a belt that is tight, as in this person's been strangled.
While it's clear a murder has been committed, there is little else in the home to explain how or when it happened.
Initially, on the first crime scene search, it was not apparent that there was any blood or anything.
After investigators leave the scene, they call Lynn's loved ones. They are devastated when they learn of the discovery.
I kind of had already tried to prepare myself for the worst. I was sitting on the couch with my daughter in the living room, and Tim Austin called. He said, "Kristen, I'm certain that's her in the basement. Of course, we have to do autopsy and everything, but based on her hair, it's her."
Lynn and I were so close that it just absolutely broke my heart when I heard what had happened to her.
My daughter and I just start crying, and we just start sobbing. I'm just like, you don't ever want that to be true.
And their suspicion of Elizabeth Carserino continues to grow.
Elizabeth Carserino avoided contacting law enforcement. It clearly showed that she was trying to avoid us.
The day after finding the body, Detective Austin uncovers more incriminating evidence.
I was able to find in Marion, North Carolina, that the store where the gas was purchased did have video.
When he reviews the footage from July 29th, a month after Lynn was last seen, he spots a familiar face.
It was not Lynn. In the video, Elizabeth is coming to the store, driving Lynn's car, pulling into the gas pumps, using a card to get gas. And in my head, I'm putting it together that Elizabeth's supposed to be in Maggie Valley. All of Lynn's stuff is found in Cherokee, and we're talking about two areas that are less than 30 minutes apart. I've got Elizabeth driving Lynn's car, and I've got Elizabeth using Lynn's bank card. We had nothing saying that Lynn ever gave her permission to use this. So I went before a magistrate who issued a warrant for Elizabeth Carserino's arrest. It started going through my mind of how could Lynn have been taken to the basement? Could one person have carried her, or is there somebody else involved? I needed those questions answered.
From there, I began working on a phone order in order to get up on Elizabeth Carserino's cell phone to see where she was in real time. And so at that point, I knew we had to find Elizabeth fast.
North Carolina investigators have collected evidence suggesting Elizabeth Carserino murdered her former patient, Lynn Keene. While the search for Elizabeth continues, detectives take a closer look at her background.
Elizabeth Catherine Carserino, born August 6, 1968. Her parents were Mary and Carl Smith, and she did have a brother named Johnny. She was raised in Goose Creek, South Carolina, just outside Charleston.
We did find out that she had spent some time in Utahville, South Carolina. She did have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and one of her sons she had just reconnected with and was trying to forge a relationship. The other son was incarcerated, and the daughter did not have anything to do with her. Elizabeth Carserino had no type of medical training. She was basically just a layman caretaker.
I think that her friendship with Wanda was kind, and so she wanted to help and just said she could be the caretaker. Elizabeth was kind enough, but she was definitely a very direct person. She seemed a little nervous around me.
The only times that in her criminal history that she had any type of trouble was writing bad checks. She had been charged with several.
Nothing in Elizabeth's record indicates she would be capable of committing such a gruesome crime. So investigators focus on tracking her down for questioning.
She said that she was traveling with her son and camping in Maggie Valley with him. And we needed to make sure that Elizabeth's son had nothing to do with Lynn going missing. And we were able to determine that he lives in Georgia.
When agents with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation interview Elizabeth's son, he claims to know nothing about Lynn's murder.
We got up on the phone line. His phone never left the state of Georgia, and he was also very cooperative throughout the investigation.
Detectives conclude Elizabeth's son had nothing to do with Lynn's murder and rule him out as a potential suspect. He informs detectives he last saw his mother less than a year ago.
It was determined that he really didn't have a lot to do with her.
On August 5th, 2 days after the body was removed from Lynn Keene's house, the medical examiner conducts an autopsy.
Dental records were provided which belonged to Lynn Keene and were matched to the body to confirm that that was in fact Lynn.
According to the pathologist, preliminary cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head and ligature strangulation, and it would be in that order. She was struck with some object in the head, causing a big head injury, but did not kill her. Ligature strangulation came second, and that is what killed her.
Investigators now have a positive identification, cause of death, and a prime suspect, but they are no closer to bringing her in.
We were able to find a couple of photographs of Elizabeth. We put this out that she was wanted.
On August 6th, they discover why Elizabeth has been so difficult to track down.
There was a nurse at a hospital that actually saw the picture of Elizabeth and recognized her as a patient of hers that was currently in the hospital.
Detectives are informed that Elizabeth was admitted 2 days earlier on August 4th.
It was relayed to me through Cherokee Tribal Police that she was in a campground staying in a tent in Cherokee, North Carolina, which was actually only a few hundred yards from where the car was abandoned.
She had left the vehicle and walked on foot to a campground and had been camping in a tent. She took some Tylenol PM and slit her wrist trying to take her own life. To me, that is showing that she's feeling very guilty for something, but definitely something traumatic has happened.
Local law enforcement in Silva were able to arrest Elizabeth at the medical facility where she was transferred from their custody to the Avery County Sheriff's Office.
Your first thought is, okay, I've got to get this person to talk to me. This was just such an egregious way to murder someone, and I just wanted to know what happened.
Coming up, police confront Elizabeth about what exactly happened to Lynn Keene.
What did she do to you to get you over that breaking?
I don't know what to say to you.
She tried to use the old amnesia thing. I think she was distancing herself from the crime.
And Lynn's loved ones seek justice for her terrifying murder.
And we're both trying to play back this whole thing in our head. Like, how could we have missed that?
On August 7th, 4 days after the body of Lynn Keene was found in her basement, investigators questioned the suspected killer, Elizabeth Carserino.
My goal at the time was to establish a rapport to get her to open up to talk to us. And then to be able to use those facts that she gives me to establish a motive.
When was the last time you talked with Miss Lynn?
The last time I spoke to her, she was supposedly in Louisiana. She was coming back with some friends. Don't know who the people are. Only know what the one girl's first name is.
Well, I got some information I want to share with you.
Okay.
Lynn is dead.
Don't tell me that.
Oh, yeah.
And whenever he tells her that, she puts her hands over her face and just, acts really surprised and starts sort of crying.
While Elizabeth appears saddened by the news of Lynn's death, she says caring for the woman had been a challenge.
I was constantly cleaning up everything. Of course, she didn't remember that because she was drunk. She yelled at me and told me that she might as well pay somebody to clean the house because I don't do a damn thing but sit on my ass. And that pissed me off to no end because I did absolutely everything. I went and bought all the groceries. I put everything up. I did all the cooking. I did all the cleaning. I did all the laundry. I even put her clothes up for her.
And nothing was never good enough.
When she got to that point, no, it wasn't.
What did she do to you to get you over that breaking?
Are you saying I did this?
I'm saying you know about it.
I don't know what to say to you if I can't remember right this moment. I don't know what to say.
You want to go take a walk?
Sure.
After a break for Elizabeth to regain her composure, investigators try questioning her again.
We know you're human. We're human. We make mistakes. But we do have a job to do.
I do understand that.
You did this. You killed Lynn and you left her in that house.
And it went back and forth that she just couldn't remember the details and what had happened. So then there come a point in time within the interview that I kind of changed my role and got more aggressive with her.
You got tired of her and you killed her. Did you not kill her? Look at me. Look at me and be honest with me.
I am being honest.
You killed her, didn't you?
Yes, I killed her. I can't get it out of my head.
That's right.
I can't get it out what I did.
Elizabeth refuses to go into detail, but her actions after leaving Lynn's house show investigators she went to great lengths attempting to cover it up.
Elizabeth is smart and knew to call Kristen multiple times and put her on a different trail, like Karen in Louisiana going down with friends. She knew to bring up that she went to Maggie Valley with her son. She thought, hey, I'm going to have time to get my story straight.
As for motive, they believe the growing tension between the two women finally became too much for Elizabeth to take.
According to Elizabeth Carserino, Lynn was very restricted about where she could go, what she could do, that it was pretty much she had to be 24/7 with Lynn. And I believe that over a period of time that anger and resentment and rage built up, and I think that maybe on this particular day, I think that Elizabeth lost her temper.
She snaps on her and hits her over the head. Instead of calling 911 of, oh God, I've messed up, I've hurt her, let's get her some help. She put a belt around her neck and took her life. I spoke with the district attorney, and he felt it appropriate to go ahead and have a warrant issued for Elizabeth for the crime of murder.
So you've got them in custody. So there is some highs, there is still some lows, because you still got a lot of work to do. This case has got to be presented in a court of law, and you're trying to make sure everything is tied up to where that this is going to be a winnable case.
After a week of investigation, Elizabeth Carserino is arrested and charged with the murder of 70-year-old Lynn Keene.
They called us right away, and it was like, we got her. We got her. I'm crying like a baby, and Lynn's brother, just devastated. First he lost his mom, and now his sister, so horribly, and Janelle too, and we're both trying to play back this whole thing in our head, like, how could we have missed that?
Like investigators, Lynn's loved ones are frustrated by Elizabeth's refusal to explain the whole truth.
She claims to have had amnesia, can't remember anything. BS. I call BS. She's lying, lying, lying.
The family's resentment is intensified by the amount of time it takes to bring Elizabeth to justice.
Elizabeth's attorney died, and so we had to wait. It took 2.5 years to even get to trial.
In January 2024, the long-awaited day finally comes.
I was there for that day. I was sitting in the front row, and in walks Elizabeth right through the door. She looks at me and then quickly looks away. Looks good killed.
I was told she had an option, plead guilty. It would be easier, and she might get less time.
Rather than go to trial, Elizabeth decides to plead guilty. At her sentencing hearing, prosecutors present new evidence for the court to take into consideration.
The crime scene agent who initially processed the scene on August 3rd, he returned and performed something called Blue Star. Blue Star is like luminol, basically a liquid chemical mixture that we use to look for blood that has either been cleaned up or there's small amounts of blood that can't be seen with the naked eye. Sprayed it within the master bedroom area, and it fluoresced quite a bit on the floor, on the bed, and in different areas within the residence. And that indicated to us that that is in fact probably where the initial assault occurred, and then likely murder there.
Prosecutors believe Elizabeth used the belt to drag Lynn down to the basement, where she used the bags of concrete to attempt to hide the body.
She's telling the family these stories that some friends and Lynn took off to Louisiana, and Elizabeth packs everything she can. She goes to the store and buys several things using Lynn's bank card, and she goes on the run.
To kill this woman that you had taken care of, and for the next month, lie to her family while her body is decomposing in the basement. It's pretty sick.
Lynn's loved ones add personal statements requesting Elizabeth receive the maximum sentence under the law.
My impact statement was mostly to let everybody know who Lynn was and how wonderful she was. None of us are perfect, but her heart and her soul, she was a wonderful person. She was caring, she was giving, she was kind. I wanted them to know about her. And the last part of my impact statement was directed mostly towards Elizabeth, and that she was lying, how evil she was. How could you live in a house where you murdered someone and they're rotting downstairs in the basement below you for almost 2 months? It's insane to me.
On January the 5th, 2024, Elizabeth Carserino was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
I'm a spiritual person. Like, I talk to Lynn every day. There is not a day that goes by that I don't think about her. Kind of like my husband, you know. I might not see them, but they're still here with me in spirit. Lynn was just a fun-loving, free spirit. She was kind. She was generous. I mean, in this day and age, when a lot of people have forgotten what kindness is, I mean, yeah, it's a loss. She never met a stranger.
Hope, a predator to track, but the prime suspect, a local petty criminal named Eddie, was already behind bars for a different crime. Traumatized. The list of names was shrinking, and the town was beginning to realize that the monster wasn't a stranger from the highway. The monster was likely someone they passed every day on Main Street. On sale. The blue lens and the gold earring were not we. The autopsy, Trudy had not gone quietly. She had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled. It was a crime of pure, unadulterated rage. A punishment for being a woman, for being kind, for being there. Onaby, Barnaby, Fossinaby, Fontemol, Intromanite. But as the medical examiner worked under the harsh fluorescent lights, microscopic pieces of a puzzle that would haunt Kelly for the next 15 years, feeling traumatized. Look at her as in through a magnifying glass. She has a blue-tinted contact lens in the left eye, the right one. It is missing. Gone. Honest yoga iduikestet. Veikep duoliken. Stranas matet ved. Veikep ite hat river silt. And this, it is a gold backing for an earring. Just the back. The earring itself is missing. Blue lens, a missing gold earring, unpatized. These when Hinti lost at the falls, Kelly realized, the gears of his mind turning. The falls is a dump site. There were no signs of a struggle there, just drag marks from the pavement. She was killed somewhere else. We find that earring. We find the killer. On again. Kelly returned to his office, the frustration boiling beneath his calm exterior. He began to look at the laundromat again, not just as a place of business, but as a structure. It was an old building, They kept the hut apartments on the upper floors were occupied. Others were skeletons of wood and plaster under renovation, when she told. A few days later, a call on the third floor of that very building. He had been sweeping up sawdust when something caught the light. A glint of gold amidst the debris. It was a gold earring, ending at traumatize. Kelly arrived from it, building. The apartment was a hollowed-out shell, smelling of fresh-cut pine and old dust. The major crime squad was called in, moving through the room with the precision of surgeons. They didn't just find the earring. They found the blue contact lens, stuck to the floorboards like a tiny, accusing eye looking up at them. On Fonkonen, Kelly whispered. The air in the room feeling heavy with the memory. This is where she died. I told them that only 2 people had keys to that specific apartment. One was the owner, Frank, who was out of town with a solid alibi. Ismend. A man named Brian Tuttle, Wisman, Obersman. And the first lie, Brian Tuttle was a ghost in the machinery of East Hampton. He was a local man, from a well-known family, but he carried a darkness that he kept carefully tucked behind a facade of niceness. He was the man who fixed the leaks, the man who held the keys, the man who was always just there, on nice days. When Kelly first brought him in for questioning, the first thing the man's demeanor, but the mark on his face, a long red jagged scratch running from Tuttle's eyebrow down across the bridge of his nose. It was fresh, the edges still angry, he said thinly. Work accident, Tuttle said, his voice flat, devoid of the tremor that usually accompanies a lie. Caught myself on a piece of framing, or see a work accident. He saw the desperate final struggle of a woman who knew she was dying. He saw Trudy's fingernails become more traumatized. Tuttle was nervous, his hands, even knowing Trudy Olochakowski. He denied. Never talked to her, he claimed, blowing a cloud of smoke toward the ceiling. Don't know who she is. Mot stay to myself, Golly. It was a lie. In a small town like East Hampton, that kind of lie was a neon sign. Witnesses quickly came forward, remembering seeing Tuttle talking to Trudy near the very apartment where she died, quieting in a Timotize. Trudy was looking for a new place, and Tuttle had used that idea, that innocent desire for a fresh start, to lure her into the shadows, ultimatized. He watched stub out bar cigarette butts in the glass ashtray, with a strange methodical intensity. In Motinchen Chinmitam, DNA was a burgeoning science, a miracle that was still out of reach for many small-town departments. But Kelly was a man of foresight, almatized dead. He knew that science was a river that only flowed forward. He waited until Tuttle left. Then he carefully bagged the cigarette butts onto Kligg's bibe. However long it takes, Brian. Mot met not going anywhere. Bangbi, Bluo, 5, the blue Volvo, and the Muyalam year shadow. Brutintishil. The evidence mounting like a rising tide. Chatled. Tuttle's girlfriend, Denise, finally broke. She told a story of a man spiraling out of control, a man fueled by jealousy and old demons. Voodoo Fulmit. He thought Mott was cheating. He went crazy that Sunday night. He took my car and didn't come back until morning. Replied, of car. Denise? Kelly asked, leaning in. Blue-green, boxy, ormitized. Dustam. It matched the witness description seen idling on the bridge at Engel Falls in the pre-dawn light. Then Tuttle's cousin, Jeremy Hartley, called. Tuttle had asked him to hide the car in a remote yard, to keep it away from prying eyes. Weight of a straight he couldn't to carry. Tent to eat. Brought the car straight to the police. Wartel turned again. The technicians found a fluid stain on the back seat. The lab confirmed it was Trudy S. Owned by cold mistress. They couldn't Tuttle was the one who put it there. There was no way to amplify the DNA to a level that would hold up in front of a jury. The prosecutor shook his head. The weight of the decision etched on his face. Uns is not enough, Kelly. We get one shot at this. If we lose now, he walks forever. We have to wait for the science to catch up. 1p. Month, soon moments into years. Collies. Kelly stayed in East Hampton. Kelly and her sister in the grocery store. He saw the question in their eyes every time they passed. A silent accusation, a plea for justice that he couldn't yet fulfill. He felt the weight of the town's judgment, botched the big one. Who said? They thought the murderer had won. The discovery at Engel Falls, Kelly would call the state crime lab. Is the technology there yet? Can we test the butts? Can we test the car seat? Kuti, off-ticed. He kept the case file on his desk, fraying. The photos of Trudy's kind face a constant companion. He became the guardian of her memory. The only man who still believed the shadow could be caught. Gushend, Muiba. The ghost of hacking were Komcha Muiba. Old Katais. 15 years later, relic of the past. The pager replaced by smartphones. Sergeant Kelly was an older man now, his hair graying at the temples, his children grown. DNA was no longer a miracle. It was a standard, a language the courts finally understood. Osley said. In Haikin Homchi Miba, the phone rang. It was the call Kelly had been waiting for, through 2 decades of silence. Conley. This is the state lab. We have a match. The DNA from the semen in the Volvo matches the saliva on the cigarette butts you submitted in Motnin Chincham Chinmitam. The numbers are astronomical, Garrett. It est him. It s Brian Tuttle. Only faintly traumatized. Tuttle thus was found dead in South Carolina life. He was the predator, Kelty remembered. He was morbidly obese, confined to a wheelchair, hooked up to an oxygen tank that hissed way. Kept a hat every breath. He was a man being consumed by his own body. Wondered when the news broke. Karma on Tomatite. And when Kelly finally stood across from him, Tuttle didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He didn't have to. The science spoke for him. The blue lens, the gold earring, the boxy Volvo, and the microscopic strands of DNA had formed a net that had finally, inevitably, tightened. The hug that remained. Un year. In Hakin Komi Sau, Brian Tuttle pleaded guilty to the murder of Gertrude Okakowski. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his numbered days in a 6x9 concrete cell. A small, grey world for a man who had taken the light from so many others. On Motroftide. Sergeant Kelly stood at Engel Falls. One last time after the sentencing, the air was crisp, the scent of wood smoke drifting from a nearby chimney. The water still rushed over the stones, a perpetual motion that seemed to wash away the stains of the past. Their colors, a testament to the cycle of life. Gone. On Fonetent. Trudy Ochakowski was more than a victim. That even in a world where monsters hide in maintenance closets, there are men who will wait 15 years to keep a promise. She was the woman who gave the hugs that made the world feel safe. Watley. Taten, to walk back to his car. He felt a strange warmth like a gentle hand on his shoulder. The hugs she gave were not forgotten. Comicus, Dawad Ridon, let the tightly, who finally found peace. They lived in the detective, who never just stopped, and in the quiet streets of East Hampton, where people could finally sleep without wondering who was watching from the window. Let Ollies. Justice, like the water at Engel Falls, had finally found its way home. Comichonly. All Falls. Wrote a novel of Belltown. Kulyog. The Last Hug. Untikes in the small Petin. Known to locals as Belltown for its history of brass and chimes. The air in November usually carried the scent of wood smoke and damp oak leaves. Onakaist. It was a place where the rhythm of life was measured by the tolling of the foundry bells and the predictable patterns of the seasons. Everyone kanoeve kept your name, your mother's maiden name, and exactly which pew you sat in on Sunday morning. It was a sanctuary of familiarity, or so they thought, the soul of that town. At 60 years old, she didn't just walk through East Hampton. At 60 years old, she moved through it like a gentle breeze, leaving a trail of comfort in her wake. She was a woman built of soft edges and a heart that seemed too large for her chest, or elderly as a home health aide. She spent her days tending to the forgotten, the elderly whose children had moved to the city, the sick who needed a hand to hold while the shadows grew long. Kontlavitait, Inyen. Not the cinematic, explosive kind, but the quiet, enduring love of a shared cup of tea, or a dog's loyal bark. She was looking for a fresh start, a new apartment where she could feel safe. Imbil Nustais. She didn't note. The shadow were already closing in, weaving through the familiar streets she called home. Und Estay. The Bilos in Samiti on a cold Monday. In Motnin Chin 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 Mitam, the bells of East Hampton. Bells would toll for her in a way the town would never forget. 1. The caregiver, morning, automatized. The sun had not yet crested the horizon. Chirped. It was Sunday, November Muimot. Her small apartment was quiet, save for the rhythmic breathing of her little dog, a feisty companion who went everywhere with her. Or Mixney Barney nudged her hand with a cold nose, demanding the day begin. Anna said. Trudy stretched, complaining slightly from the years of lifting patients and standing on her feet. She looked at the framed photo on her nightstand. Her daughters. They were her pride, her North Stars. Again, was rooted in the hope that they would always feel the warmth she tried to provide for the world. To her, love was a physical thing, something you could wrap around someone like a handmade quilt. Angels he din. Little one, she whispered to the dog, we have laundry to do, and then we'll see about that new apartment. Olby Kentleet. She had been feeling uneasy lately. It was a prickle at the back of her neck when she pulled the curtains. There had been a man, or the shadow of one, outside her window. A peeping Tom. The neighbors whispered in hushed tones over picket fences. Friend Ray Brown. A man she had gone on a few dates with. Ray was kind, a good man, by all accounts, but the spark Trudy had once known with her ex-boyfriend, Harold, was, to their conduced. A passion she saw Rai as a friend, a steady harbor, but at her heart still yearned for something she couldn't quite name. A passion that had perhaps died out with the foundry fires of the old town. Womeni at Len. By Purple. Trudy pulled her car into the parking lot of the local laundromat. It was a routine chore, the kind of mundane task that grounds a life. She loaded the machines, the rhythmic sloshing of the water, providing a meditative backdrop to her thoughts. The laundromat was empty, except for the fluorescent hum and the smell of bleach. She was thinking about the apartment Brian Tuttle had mentioned. Brian was the maintenance man for the building. A local guy from a known family, always around, always helpful in that quiet, slightly off-putting way that people in small towns often overlook. He had told her about a vacancy on the 3rd floor. It was perfect. It was close. It was a chance to leave the shadows of her current window behind and start over where the locks were stronger and the view was higher. Size. She didn't notice the blue-green vault size. Idling at most the edge of the lot, its headlights extinguished like a predator's eyes in the dark. She didn't see the glossy, bloodshot eyes watching her from across the street, fueled by a mixture of rejection and a brewing, toxic rage. The way toward the silence of the stream, a man of tradition. On his days off, the badge stayed in the drawer, but the detective never truly turned off. It was Monday, November Murihai, and he was doing what thousands of American fathers were doing, dropping his 3 children off at swim practice on Fullant. The car smelled of damp towels and snacks, a chaotic, wonderful slice of normalcy. And the sound, insistent chirping water were interrupted by the sharp, insistent chirp of his Vajra. He looked at the numeric code and felt a cold stone drop in his stomach, onto word. Hufi Espertler. In Mochinchin Mitam, a pager meant one thing. The world had stopped turning the way it was supposed to. On him off to go. The office, he told his kids, his voice steady, but his mind already racing. East Hampton was a sleepy bedroom community. They hadn't seen a homicide in 10 years. The biggest drama usually involved a property line dispute or a teenager driving too fast near the lake. When in traumatized, the Arifne stationly was different. It was heavy, the air thick with the unsaid. Sir, Martin's swan, said, his face pale, his knuckles white as he gripped a clipboard. Down at Engel Falls, Bindaudi, Ban traumatized. Engel Falls was a local hangout, a place where high school kids went to skip class or share their first kiss behind the curtain of falling water. It was a place of innocence, now desecrated. Colonies. Kelly drove toward the remote area, the winding roads of East Hampton blurring past, reaching for a gray sky. When he arrived, the scene was surreal. The autumn woods were vibrant with reds and golds, but in the shallow, freezing water of the stream lay a woman. Her hands were tied behind her back with silver duct tape, a cruel contrast to the natural beauty surrounding her. His boots splashing in the creek. Offer you a song here, guys. He did see a victim. He saw Trudy. He saw the woman who had hugged half the town, the woman whose kindness was a local legend. He saw the mother of the girls he knew from the local schools, Quayside traumatai, frozen, in a final moment of terror that didn't neatly belong on her. Bitty. This isn't he, a crime scene, Kelly whispered, looking at the drag marks on the pavement and the tire tracks leading away. This is a dump site. He brought her here to hide her, but the water wouldn't keep his secret. A monster. In Belltown had begun, once of a struggle. Angelis. Kelly spent hours in the autopsy room, a place of cold, steel and clinical silence that stood in stark contrast to the woman Trudy had been. The hum of the refrigerator units felt like a low growl. Manual strangulation. The medical examiner concluded, his voice echoing. Brutal. There as bruising on the face. Blunt force trauma. Signs of a struggle. She fought. Kelly. She fought hard for every breath. Initially detail. Eyes scanning for the always leave behind. He was not looking for a motive yet. He was looking for a signature. We might. Look at her eyes. Oh no offense, buffer. Lenses. A small vanity for a woman who spent her life caring for others. There was a blue lens in her left eye, vivid even in death. The right eye was bare. The iris a natural, muted hazel. White teasing. And her hair, the examiner noted, pulling a small glinting object from the grey-blonde strands with a pair of tweezers. It was the backing to a gold earring. The earring itself was gone, likely ripped away in the violence. Onig bin richly, and lissing cum airing. Kelly noted in his ledger, the scratching of his pen the only sound. If we find those, we find the room where she died. We find the ghost of the struggle. We are streaming. The news had traveled with the speed of a summer storm. The Belltown chimes felt like funeral dirges. Every man in town was a suspect. Ray Brown, the suitor, was brought in first. Abi. His heads in his hands, smelling of old cigarettes and grief. But his alibi was ironclad. He had been at a bowling tournament with several other police officers. He was a man who lost a friend, not a killer. One deliced. Then there was Harold Jameson, the ex-boyfriend. His story was the kind of tragedy only a small town could produce. A story of what if. Bin Lapi and Tingen. Mott saw her car, Harold told Kelly, his voice cracking, eyes searching the floor for answers that weren't there, until quite traumatized. Sunday night. I saw her car running in front of the laundromat. The dog was barking. Mott waited for her in the lot next door. I wanted to apologize for a fight we had. But she never came out. I thought she was avoiding me, seeing me, and staying inside. So Mott went home. Unbelievably sad. It was a terrible alibi if Harold walked outside. If he had just checked the machines. Trudy might still be alive. But guilt wasn't the same as murder. And Harold Escar was clean. He was just a man living in the what if. Completing. The carpenter and the ghost boy. All ties. The breakthrough did lead. All dead. Or a dramatic chase, it came from a carpenter saw and the dust of a renovation. Entel interested. One. A few days later.
In the apartments above the laundromat.
The very building Trudy had been interested in was cutting through a floorboard when something caught the light. It wasn't a nail or a copper pipe, one inquiring. Glowing, it amidst the sawdust like a fallen star, undertooting the town. Arrived within minutes, the sirens silent to avoid alerting the town. Construction, smelling of raw wood, plaster, and the cold damp of an unfinished project. As the State Police Major Crime Squad sifted through the dust with brushes and sieves, they found the second piece of the puzzle. It implutised. A tiny, blue disc, stuck to the underside of a radiator. Contact lens. Off into het intrun. The third floor. A place of isolation. Someone had lured her up here under the guise of showing her the apartment, using her hope for a new beginning as a trap. Someone she trusted enough to walk into a dark, empty room with. The landlord. Frank, who was visibly shaking. Beside. Just me, Frank replied, his voice a whisper. And Brian. Brian Tuttle, the maintenance man. He was supposed to be working up here all weekend. 5. The man with the scratch. Only a monster. He looked like a man who had been beaten down by life and had decided to take it out on the world. Condinost. Bunning the biases list. When he walked into the station for his interview, Kelly noticed it immediately. A long, jagged scratch running from his eyebrow to the bridge of his nose, still red and angry. Onsuming fanay. Caught it on a branch at work, Tuttle said, his eyes darting around the room, never settling on Kelly. His voice was a low, nervous rumble. Tight. He was sketchy. He was vibrating with a hidden frequency of guilt that Kelly could feel in his own teeth. Kelly checked his record, and the blood in his veins turned to ice. Tuttle wasn't just a maintenance man. He was a predator with a prior conviction for abduction and sexual assault. Wantint, a wolf in the fold, or in personal space. Leaning forward into Tuttle's personal space, weighing it out. Never met her. Don't know who you talking about. Often money traumatized. Was the first lie, and it was a clumsy one. In East Hampton, everyone knew Trudy. The regulars at the laundromat had seen them talking about the apartment. The owners of the pizza place across the street had seen him watching her. Onabili. Tuttle claimed he didn't drive. He said his license was suspended, making him a victim of the system. He said he had been at the pizza place drinking away his sorrows because his girlfriend, Denise, had cheated on him. He played the part of the scorned lover, the broken man, the Biden traumatized. Kelly visited the pizza place. The owners, John and Anthony, remembered Tuttle that night. He was just drinking. He was spiraling. His eyes were red and glossy, fueled by a mixture of alcohol and something darker. He had been rejected by his girlfriend, and he was looking for someone to punish. Onitaist. Ontrokai. He says liar. She told the detective, her voice hard with the exhaustion of dealing with a man like Tuttle. He didn't catch me cheating. Mott threw him out because he was back on the bottle and the drugs. He says dangerous when he's like that. And when he left, he took my car. Wendy, car, Denise. Quite, she said, blue-green. Boxy style. You can miss it. Waiting in list. Has the same car a witness had taking her niece to the bus stop. At Engel Falls in the early hours of Monday morning. The pieces were fitting together, but they were made of shadows and circumstantial evidence. Pornomytides. The science of silence. On a tide. Kelly's had the car, he had the crime scene. He even had a cousin of Tuttle, Jeremy Hartley, who called the station with a heavy conscience. Commit confessed. Leading Kelly to a blue-green Volvo parked in a remote yard. He said he needed it out of sight. Mott had a bad feeling, Sarge. A real bad feeling. Being the filtin. Inside the car, the CSI tech team went to work. They found a stain on the rear seat cover. The lab confirmed it. Trudy's biological fluid. It tied her to the car, and the car to the bridge. Gurmum ning intently, eyes, Barnaby, tumatized. DNA technology was a flickering candle in a dark room. They could prove Trudy had been in the car, but the lab couldn't amplify the sample enough to prove Tuttle had been the one with her. There were no fingerprints on the duct tape, no scrapings under the nails that provided a clear profile. Groski, sir. If he has a good lawyer, Luklung claims someone else stole the car, or that the evidence was contaminated. If we lose now, he walks forever. Honorably, Tentian, dit Corrida ties to wist the townen. He saw Trudy's daughters in the grocery store, their eyes hollow with a grief that was turning into a desperate search for an answer he couldn't give. He heard the scuttlebutt, that the small town cops had botched the big one, being easily. Motmet not giving up, Kelly whispered to the file on his desk, which had grown thick with dead ends. Wole shade, all a chefit sight, a comedy crucially. Stubbing them out with a violent flick of his wrist. Calais had watched him. Kelly had watched him, then quietly collected the butts after Tuttle left. Greeting, traumatized. He sealed them in plastic, a message in a bottle, sent to future he hoped would be smarter than the present. Oltui. The Chinmiget faded into the digital age. Kelly's hair turned the color of the Connecticut winter. Tuttle moved away, disappearing into the humidity of South Carolina, likely thinking he had outrun the ghost of the woman he had thrown into the stream. Ondent 7. The resurrection of the case. Intron Plisely entice. The world was attentively, Hoopa, of him mirror. Ba. The American detective was now an elder statesman of the department. But the Ochakowski file never left his desk. It was his penance and his promise. Under Comi, Tenchpoli get. That didn't exist when Trudy died. Took another look at the samples. They were looking for touch DNA, for the microscopic signatures of a killer. Bais, Opa. Barney, Fontide. They Fonsly, Beist. They drew a profile from the fluidly and compared it to the DNA on the old stale cigarette butts. Sergeant Kelly had saved from that Martin Chin Chinmitam interview room. Wadley. A match. The numbers were through the ceiling. A 1 in billions chance it was anyone else. Guaizamulip. Kelly didn't pump his fist. He simply felt a profound, quiet relief that tasted like the end of a long, cold night. Quist. When the cold case unit found Brian Tuttle in South Carolina, the predator had been tamed by time and his own vices. He was morbidly obese, confined to a wheelchair, gasping for air through an oxygen tank. He looked less like a monster and more like a ruined monument to his own sins. Gonjol Matruti. He wouldn't confess. But the science spoke for Trudy. Obenlibi traumatized. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, Tuttle finally pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to the rest of his life in prison, a sentence that, given his health, was a countdown he would to win. Empire logid. The memory of Belltown, Koskia's name, is still spoken in East Hampton. But the tone has changed over the decades. She isn't just a victim, she is the reason the town grew up, the reason the bells now seem to ring with a bit more clarity. Offered Binte. She is remembered for the Trudy hugs, those world savings braces that could make a person feel whole again. She is remembered by the patients she tended to and the daughters who never stopped believing in her. Untomail. He still drives past the laundromat. He looks up at the third-floor window and doesn't see a crime scene. He sees a victory of patience over evil. Osing off guide. Hint. He sent to an FBI wood expert. The thousands of tips he followed, and the cigarette butts that bridged a 16-year gap. Wood enticed. Kiss, or a cinematic showdown. It was a man who would stop, a town that would forget, and a woman whose light was too bright for the shadows to ever truly swallow. Oting in chase. The bells of East Hampton chime every hour. They chime for Trudy, and they chime for the truth, which, like the water at Engel Falls, always finds its way to the surface. It was Onben, Hongunben, Ond of Blood, Beatles and Bad Boys, Mot, the humidity of homicide. Onmispel says, Houston in July is hot blanket that someone has soaked in swamp water and then draped over 2 million people. It is a place where your shirt becomes part of your skin the moment you step outside. and the air is thick enough to chew. Overtuiet. Viseri tendischen, viting in kating, hirusifing attending awful discon. Detective Sergeant Brian Harris was enjoying. He was sitting in his kitchen, the air conditioning, humming a rhythmic prayer against the degree morning, sipping a cup of coffee that was just the right temperature to ignore or feel traumatized. It did just ring. It danced across the granite countertop with the malicious intent of a small electronic demon. Wanafin, he grunted. Otiotais. We got at Sleeper in South Park, right across from Jones High. Wamantais Tobai. Harris sighed. A sleeper was potral speak for a body, usually because it had ceased to be a person and had started becoming a piece of evidence. It's July Barodi, Harris muttered. Can the people just wait until after the fireworks to kill each other? One looks messy. Offie till quay intul traumatized this. Harris hung up, finished in one heroic gulp, and prepared to enter the Houston blast furnace. Uin my traumatized. Meanwhile, was experiencing the peculiar cocktail of adrenaline and nausea that comes with being the lead investigator for the very first time. Perez had been in homicide for 3 months. He still had that new detective smell. His suit was crisp, his shoes were polished, and he still believed that logic played a role in human behavior. Undrain, Osil. He was currently staring at a ditch across from the high school. A young boy had found the body. The kid had thought it was just a man taking a very dedicated nap. His father, possessing the weary wisdom of a South Park resident, had taken one look and called Chincha Murimot. Louise. Morning, detective, a voice boomed, walking with atmosphere. Harris didn't walk so much as he navigated the atmosphere. He looked like a man who had seen everything twice and was too impressed by the third viewing. Upon then, morning, Sarge, Perez said, who was worried about vomiting on his own shoes. We've got a female, late 20s or early 30s. No ID. Multiple GSWs to the head. It's a mess, Sarge. The hair, the blood. It's a mosaic of bad decisions. Harris looked at the body. Transfer. Blood, he noted, pointing to the pavement. She was killed here. Someone pulled up, dragged her out like a bag of yesterday. Trash, and kept driving. Look at her, Mike. What do you see? Quite winted. She's got all her jewelry. Gold, rings, the works. Exactly, Harris said, not ending. If this was a robbery, the thief is the worst businessman in Texas. This is personal. Or it has a message. Or, as is usually the case in this town, it has a man who couldn't handle the word no. Why? The voice of the airwaves, coming in says, of cleaning the idmes of victim to count the holes. The detectives started the real work, the hunt for a name. Tuition, Autens, age. A person without a name is a ghost in the machine. But the state of Texas has a long memory, especially when it comes to fingerprints and driver S licenses. On July Nam, the ghost got a name. Kumba Sise, on a victim. She was the mover and the shaker, as Harris liked to call them. She was a first-generation American, the daughter of immigrants from Sierra Leone who had come to the States to build a life. And Kumba had built a skyscraper of a life. Ophel radio, per ofterby. How does to be? Often, she was a model, a host, Tau station, an internet station, and talked about where she interviewed rappers and talked about the kind of social issues that made people uncomfortable. Ostar, Perez said, flipping through her social media. Look at this. Ambition, dreams, fans. She wasn't living a high-risk lifestyle. She was living a high-success lifestyle. In the light, Harris replied. Often you stay Shonabi. The general manager. Hilliard looked like a man who had lost his best investment. Oh my beast. Kumba was the real deal, Hilliard said. Voi crackent. She had that voice, that it factor. She was going national. Everyone loved her. Want the boyfriends. What about the boyfriends? Kondishalotman. Face soured, as if he just bitten into a lemon. There was David Gabriel. Bitter ex. Always arguing about money. And then there was Leroy. Leroy. Puldifon. Leroy stoots, sometime. Or he tried to. He called himself a bad boy. Mott called him a liability. He was jealous, man. Jealous of her fame. Jealous of her mic time. He went on a rant. One night. Called women every name in the book. I had to fire him. He was a time bomb with a goatee. Below. The art of the amateur arsonist. Opadminst. Whilst looking at a blue looking fin for Leroy. The Houston Fire Department was looking at a blue Volkswagen Beetle. Way University. Someone had tried to burn it. Now, there are two types of people who beuro no cars. Professionals and idiots. The professional uses an accelerant, leaves the windows down for oxygen, and ensures the vehicle is a charred skeleton. Any twin tabri ways. Of windows up, Harris said, circling the soot-covered car. At the evidence lot. He poured gas inside, lit a match, and closed the doors. The fire ran out of oxygen in 3 minutes. It's not a burned car. It's a smoked ham. Watcher, the pogoers, I traumatize. Inside the car, there was blood on the driver, a treasure's door. There were fibers. And, most importantly, there was the realization that the killer was not a criminal mastermind. He was a man in a panic to steal the car. Drive then fail to burn it, Perez asked. Osteopath. Mike. Harris said. He thinks he is the smartest guy in the room, but he is not even the smartest guy in the car. He thinks the fire worked because he saw a flash. He didn't stay to check. He is too busy thinking about his next radio monologue. Bon. The bitter ex and the alibi party. Kotlik. They decided to play a game called The Verder is Right. The first contestant was David Gabriel, the bitter ex-boyfriend. Otin traumatized. David Gabriel was brought into the interview room. Who had spent a lot of time thinking about money he didn't have. One in the good cop. Perez said, playing the good cop. Go snapped. But Mott didn't kill her. Mott met a businessman. Gosh no to. A businessman with a grudge, Harris added from the corner. Where were you on the night of July High, Nend? It was at a house party. Gabriel said confidently. 24 people. Music, drinks, the whole thing. Check the guest list. Quint listed. Liskly, Gabriel was telling truther. He had 24 witness truth. Who confirmed he was busy being bitter at a party miles away from the crime scene. Harris sighed. Bring on the bad boy. Whipple. The cousin and the boots. Osim lucid. The break didn't come from a lab or a camera. It came from a man named Darrell. 1-4. Darrell was also a man who did not want to go to prison for a murder he didn't to commit. He called the police, sounding like he was trying to vibrate out of his own skin. On a bonitize. Darrell whispered into the phone. Late Saturday, He had scratches on his face. He was panicking. He needed a change of clothes. He looked like he'd been in a fight with a lawnmower. Cosais. Daryl asked. Oiten boots. Brown polar boots. And man there, as blood on him. Again traumatized. Perez and Harris didn't walk to Daryl's house. They practically teleported. They found the boots. They found the blood. And then they checked Leroy Fess record on PSNV. Mike, staring at a computer screen. Leroy Stutz, Motnin Chincham Chinmahai, convicted of murder, sentenced to Bon Muilam years, served Muitam and got paroled. Quisai. He told Kumba he went in for robbery. Perez said, horrified. He told her he took the fall for a friend. He lied about being a murderer to a woman who interviewed people for a living. It was Baitmas. Said the layers are peeling back. She found out he was a killer. She found out he'd been with men in prison. She was going to leave him, and she was going to tell the world who he really was. In Leroy's head, that's a death sentence. We saw. The interrogation game. Quite traumatized. They found Leroy stepping out of his mother's car. He didn't resist. He didn't fight. He just looked at the detectives with the cold, dead eyes of a shark that had forgotten how to swim. Again dine. In the interview room decided it was time for a lesson. He sat across from Leroy. Perez sat next to him, the pebble ready to be grabbed. Untuchelo size. Harris said, You, a smart guy. You know how this works. We have the boots. We have the DNA on Kumba's clothes. We have your daughter, Latrice, who admitted she gave you a ride to the TSU campus right before the Beetle turned into a grill. Quizni Gimin. Mot don't know what you're talking about. Mot loved that woman. Quite anabur. He picked up a marker and wrote. He picked up a marker and wrote. Weishlin uplandepan. Holy send. What letter is missing? Only. An R. Fleshnamur. It spells like murder. It feels like murder. But it is missing one piece. The R. And in this room, Leroy, the R stands for reason or reality. You can give us the letter, gonna be, full in the bromanabi. And a jury in Texet Tentret of El Ditun has a very vivid imagination when it comes to the word murder. Ruminbe of Omis blinked. He was a sociopath in his natural habitat. He denied everything. He claimed he didn't know how blood got on his boots. Maybe the boots were bleeding. Maybe the car set itself on fire out of sympathy. Kobe. Don't you? Harris whispered. Because you survived. Tam years. In the joint. You untouchable. But you not. You just a man. Who killed a woman. Because she was better than you. She had the voice, the fame, and the future. All you had was a gun and a pair of bloody boots. All broadcast. This infant, I say. The investigation reconstructed the final moments of Kumba Sise, Unabi, a warehouse party. She tells him it is over. She tells him she knows about his past. She tells him she is moving on. Wamatized. In the parking lot, he grabs her. She fights back. The scratches on his face are her final signature. He pulls a pistol. He shoots her once in the back of the head. A coward's shot. Undo the Beetle. He drags her into the pit hole. And Bron in the Bront lead. He drives to a neighborhood, dumps her like trash, tries to erase his existence with a gallon of gasoline and a closed window. Untusis is traumatized. Leroy Stutz went to trial. He pleaded not guilty, of course. In his mind, he was the victim. He was the one who had been insulted. He was the one whose reputation had been threatened. Offerty resentment. The video of the amateur arsonist and the murder on the whiteboard. They found him guilty in record time, when B. Without parole. He returned to the Texas prison system, not as a bad boy, but as a permanent resident of a cage, Ban or Barnaby's. Odd ways. Kumbai's mother stood in the courtroom, her voice steady. Maud Haupt, she said. Maud ve kepa note him to wake up every day and remember that he killed a sweet person who just wanted to live. Maud ve kepa note him to die, knowing what he did. Often traumatized. Back at the station, Harris and Perez sat in the silence of the homicide division. The humidity was still there, but the air felt a little thinner. Des asked. 1. On police. No. Hardly anyone ever does. But we got the truth, Mike, and in this city, that's as close to a miracle as you're gonna get. Wang Heblet. Perez looked at his polished shoes. They weren't so shiny anymore. He'd grabbed the pebble. He was a detective now. Poor Shomibad. Dwight. And somewhere out there, the Houston sun was rising, waiting for the next person to forget that dirt, the word no, is not an invitation to a crime scene. On community sees the problem. When is and wasn't he sen? The sleeping man who wasn't he convertized. The sun in Houston, does he just shine? It interrogates. By Chinze, Bamifut AM, Hayan Komkom Misao, the humidity had already reached a level best described as living inside a giant S-mouth. In the Sen of South Park neighborhood, the air soup of asphalt heat and the scent of pre-4th of July charcoal grills. One low tumor. The very low be, he sently, he said. A young boy, Gebby, integrity of a hot dog bun, was wandering near a ditch across from Jones High School. He saw a man sleeping. At least, that's what he told himself, wasting immunity pure. Man was sleeping in a way that defied the laws of comfort. It was a stillness that didn't belong in a neighborhood where even the stray cats were constantly twitching from the heat. Kwong, the boy said, tugging at his father has sleeve back at the house. There's a guy. He want he wake up. We mid-breakfast, and not particularly in on a neighborhood welfare check, followed his son. He stood at the edge of the ditch. He shouted, "A hey!" That went unanswered. He got closer. Then he stopped. The man was a woman, although we sent. She was the opening act of a very long weekend for the Houston Police Department. Una Shena. Embot. Lizni Tengilisles. Harris was a man's people usually try to unsee. He was currently sipping his first coffee of the morning. A brew strong enough to dissolve a nickel, when his phone screamed. Voices. He grunted. Visage. Southeast side. Across from the high school. It's messy. Obikent. A hobby Kent. Harris sighed. Instead of fireworks and potato salad, he was going to get blood on his loafers and a headache that no amount of caffeine could cure. Onde. Chapter 2. The Rookie and the Remans. Urbana, when Harris arrived at the scene. The yellow tape was already fluttering in the breeze, like festive, macabre bunting. Waiting for him was Michael Perez, Onegigis, for 3 months. Perez, he still had that new for car smell. Clean suit, polished shoes, and a look of earnestness that Harris found otehat, charming and exhausting. This was to be Perez, first seen as lead investigator, traumatized. Yet, so Harris, in a rare fit of veteran altruism, had volunteered to be his +1 until a permanent match could be found. Komtulf one coughed. Morning, detective, Perez said, trying to look like a man who hadn't just seen a corpse in a ditch, replied, squinting at the sun. So, what do we have besides a ruined Sunday? Inabi, late 20s, consulting his notepad. Eat, no ID. Multiple gunshot wounds to the head. It's hard to tell the exact count. There's a lot of hair, a lot of blood, and the Houston humidity isn't to helping the mess factor. Rwanda Pai, he didn't see a person. He saw a story, crossing Mike. Harris said, pointing at the grass. Transfer blood. She wasn't killed here. A car pulled up, the door opened, and she was dragged out like a bag of yesterday's set trash. It says, a dump job, we tied. Harris knelt down, his knees popping. Like small caliber fire, off-matized. Rings, necklace, the works. If this was a robbery, the thief is either the most incompetent criminal in Texas, or he was in a hell of a hurry. This wasn't about money, this was personal. Personal, or domestic, or just plain mean. Unis Stenbinin, Perez asked, looking toward Jones. High school, on east. Across the street, Harris nodded, cameras. Let us see if the school's security system was paying attention while the rest of the world was asleep. Unamashing in gent. Big Gesh. Onaby huddled in a cramped, air-conditioned security office that smelled like old gym socks and ozone. They were looking for a ghost. Footage was grainy, the kind of quality that makes a Cadillac look like a UFO. But then, there it was. Two headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. A vehicle stopped exactly where the body was found, emerged off from the driver's side, moved to the passenger side, and began a rhythmic straining motion. Huamawan, Harris whispered, his ass dragging her. Gosantly returned. In the still quite traumatized, they saw the something. Beggar being hauled toward the ditch, the figure hopped back into the car and sped off. Race noted. Bubble-shaped, dark, of the Merhurst. A Volkswagen Beetle, the car of the people, also, apparently, the car of the murderers. Oni no more twined. The next day was July Bone Trin Hinning. While the rest of Houston was debating the merits of dry rub versus wet sauce, Harris and Perez were at the morgue. Examiner. Morning, Doc, Harris said as the medical examiner began the grim work. Komiwazer, a masterclass in physics and violence. Close contact wound, the doctor noted. Look at the stippling. That gunpowder literally tattooed into the skin. The gun was pressed against her. This wasn't a drive-by. This was an execution. Because we're a bust. No project in the skull to match to a weapon. But the fingerprints. In Texas, if you want to drive, the state gets your prints. Wheat na dao. The computer chirped. Ontene, kumba sise. Bees. Bamimot. Ofal. Missing. Cripple. Now we have a name. Now we can start the real headache. Marked. The radio star. Comin by commutebi. Mivable task of making the death notification. It says the part of the job that never makes it into the glossy recruitment brochures. Ortlace. He arrived at the Sis Mot Met. Sorry for your loss, face. Mrs. Sis opened the door, and before Perez could show his badge, her eyes went hollow. She knew. Mothers always know when the air in the house changes. Going to traumatize. Her voice a fragile thing. She was going to be someone. Ovend. Kamba Sise was a force of nature. An immigrant from Sierra Leone, she had built a life in Houston that was the definition of the American dream. She was a model, She was a host on an internet radio show, Style Radio, was the mover. A shaker and a woman who Ninsley, who didn't take no for an answer. He kept the head anyone. Perez asked softly. Gueli hesitated. There was David Gabriel, a brother said, an ex. He was bitter. They fought about money. He's got a temper. Perez wrote down. Candidate number 1, Ponticed. But then the brother added a detail. Perk up back at the station. She had a car, a blue Volkswagen Beetle. It has gone. Rosenborten. Well, have a bitter ext. And a missing Beetle. Let us find David Gabriels and see if he says as stupid as he is angry. The Balfai. The Baulo and the Barnout. Wanimand. David Gabriel was brought into the murder is right contestant. Chair. He was sweaty, defensive, and loud. Ombik to nothing. Kumaba Ka had her own money. Mot was at a party. Ogmet alibi. But Gabriel was telling the truth. 24 witnesses, might him, sober enough to remember a face, placed him miles away from the high school at the time of the dump. On Gabriel is out. Harrisit grumbled. Which means we back to square one, or square Beetle. Volkswagen. It didn't take long. Texas Southern University, TSU campus police called in. They had a report of a vehicle fire across from a dormitory. Great. Dreamquist.
Car.
It was a blackened husk, but the arsonist had been an idiot. They had rolled up the windows before lighting the fire. It needs oxygen. Genius. Harris said, peering into the smoldering interior. He tried to burn the evidence, but all he did was smoke cure it. Look there, on the driver's door. Blood swabs. Awful height. The TSU surveillance camera school est, they evener than the high school be. They showed the Beetle being abandoned at Haizo Bayfoot AM. A day later, a figure returned in a Buick LeSabre. A big flash, a burst of flame, and the figure ran away. Family affair. A family affair? Wheatley. Isquealed, Olisly said. A man named Carlton Turner Teist. Called. He was a concert promoter who had found an ID card smeared ve kep ite hot blood near a warehouse party. Normally, Kumba Sisse. Bontibir. Babid. The theory was forming. Kumba goes to a party, gets into an argument in the parking lot, gets shot, and her ID falls out during the struggle. Widi, but who was she with? Traumatized. The detectives went to Style Radio. They met Donald Hilliard, the general manager. Otis. Kumba, man, she was the real deal, Hilliard said, shaking his head. She had that voice, that national fame energy. Boyfriend, Harris asked. Harris. Leroy, Hilliard said, his lip curling. Leroy Stutz. He was a co-host for a while. But the man was a ticking time bomb, jealous as a green-eyed monster. Kumba was the star, and Leroy was. Well, Leroy was just the guy holding the mic. He went on a rant one night, unlinchized. Calling Mott had to fire him. He was jeopardizing everything Kumba built, indolently. Stute, criminal. Record. He didn't just have a record, he had a bibliography. Until quite traumat Mike. Harris said, sliding a folder across the desk. Monin, Chinchin Hai. Murder. Convicted. Sentenced to 45 years. Served 18 and got paroled. Ulitais. A murder would like his girlfriend being more popular than him, Perez said. That is a classic motive. It is also incredibly pathetic. Oshinawa trying for a warrant. They needed a smoking gun, or in this case, a bloody boot, went on the sole. The blood on the sole. We rang again. It was a man named Darrell. He sounded like he was vibrating with fear. Onirietin. Isk's cousin, he whispered. He showed up at my sister Rondai's house on the night of the Hainan Zen. He had scratches on his face. He was panicked. He had blood on his clothes. Often. Go on, Harris said, his voice as smooth as silk. We close. He left his boots. Brown polos. Boots. They got blood on them, man. Mot. Don't want no part of this. Geril. Don't move. Were exactly what they needed. Forensics confirmed. Human blood. Specifically, Kumba's blood. Oftis. Harris checked the registration Buick Litabres in the area. Lo and behold, Leroy's daughter, Latrice, owned one. The getaway driver had a name. Paul 8. The pebble in the hand, Gussie, in Tretley. Le Truffal Fentley was brought into the interrogation room. She was hostile, evasive, and clearly terrified of her father. Honorable again. Harris sat in the corner, watching Perez take the lead. It was a test. The pebble in the hand, Harris thought. Let's see if he can grab it. Oz said, leaning in. We know about the car. We know your dad asked for a ride to TSU. We have the video. Waist-sleeved. He just asked for a ride, she snapped. I see nothing. He went to the Beetle, came back. How we left? Is asked. But the scenes was loud. She had placed Leroy at Montfy, the scene of the arson. It was enough. On a 9. The sociopath Spemling would be. Weasley Yawi Bor. Lie high. Leroy Stute was arrested. A week later, stepping out of his mother's car, like he didn't have a care in the world. One do Degenschly. He was brought into the interrogation room. He sat there with a look of smug superiority. No opath, no emotion, no remorse, just a cold, calculating belief that he was the smartest man in the room. Leroy. Mott met Brian. This is Mike, Harris said, pulled up a chair. Mott met not going to waste your time. You've been in the game. You know how this works. Leroy just stared. All with the blood, Harris continued. We. Kumbai's clothes. We have your daughter placing you at the burning car. We have the video. We Gent. Maud didn't do it. Community-aced. Harris turned to a whiteboard in the room. He picked up a marker. He wrote, Woody, E.R. Omeroy. Harris said, what letter is missing? Offin squinted. An R. Unti just like. Murder. But it is missing one letter, one piece of the story. You can provide that piece, or we can let a jury fill it in for you. And trust me, eyed of a tidry. Vivid imagination. When it comes to guys who kill their girlfriends because they re jealous of a radio show. Attackti. Leroy thing. Yuri saying, tell my story. Maybe it was self-defense? Maybe she was crazy? Onbait traumatized. Mott saying, the word is almost spelled, Leroy. Yuri the only one who can decide if the last letter is an R or something else. Ondulid notice. Mott didn't do it. You got nothing. Urio, tin. You just don't have the sense to realize you were sitting in a chair that's already bolted to the floor of a prison cell. Onion bunda traumatize. The final broke out. Afford, offening, tute. The trial was a formality. The evidence was a Mauni Stutes was a man trying to hide behind a pebble. Onatized. Kumba had met Leroy at the warehouse to break up with him. She had found out the truth, that his prison time wasn't for a robbery he took the fall for, but for a cold-blooded murder. She wanted out. On piquen, disten. The man who couldn't stand, being second best. There was a fight. Scratches on his face. Kumba tried to run. He forced her into her own car at gunpoint. Wade dumped her like trash, and then spent the next 48 hours trying, and failing, to be a criminal mastermind. Alchemy, almost no tie. Wand, guilty, unarmed. Life without parole. Roy was led away. He still had that smug look. He still thought he was winning. A piece of work, Perez said, as they walked out into the Houston sun, which was still hot, still humid, and still unapologetic. One to be tied. A monster, Harris agreed. But at least he is a monster with a permanent address. Woman, he's a beto again. Kumba says, voice was gone from the airways, but the silence she left behind was louder than any radio show. She was a woman who wanted to be someone, and in the end, she was the woman who brought down a killer who thought he was untouchable. Light. It was cold. Want Mike, he said. The 4th of July is over. Let S go see what S in the ditch for the 5th. Gosnant. Is fiasco. Gwand. Homicide tale. Park. The sleeping beauty of Sour Park. Wen Kwai, Hintley. Humidity began with the kind like you Houston breathing through a warm, wet wool blanket. It was Chinza Bamai 5 a.m., and the sun was already aggressively trying to melt the asphalt in the South Park neighborhood, if not Taite Trompataise. In Dismer town, beautiful summer day was usually code for stay inside with AC, or risk becoming a human puddle, who's primary traumatized, the get, or the ones that just fizzle and pop was wandering near Jones High School. He saw a man, or what he thought was a man, sleeping in the grass. Guan, hey mister, the boy whispered. Guiyun, Wanan. In fact, like Dwayne trying to become one, with the Houston dirt, something about the stillness of the figure gave the boy a primal chill that bypassed his summer brain entirely. He didn't poke it with a stick. He didn't try to steal a wallet, that a kid in Houston can do. He went and got his father, offered Trommel, a guy, sleeping. He is really good at it. He hasn't moved an inch, the boy said, tugging on his father's shirt. Traumatized. The father, a man who had seen in the mile sleeping the middle of a field at Chinzer Bami Foot, AM usually involved a heavy dose of regret or a permanent vacation from life, walked over. He looked, he nudged, he sighed. Oni, the dad said. Blue silence, not even a snore. Musendis, bitik bisnen. The dad's internal alarm, the one tuned to the frequency of police business, started screaming. He pulled out his phone and dialed Chinmi Mot. Ozad Maid. When the EMT's usual ritual of checking for pulses that weren't there. As they rolled the figure over, they realized two things. First, it wasn't a man. It was a woman, probably in her early 30s, dressed for a night out that had gone horribly, terminally wrong. Will it be? Second, the man the boy thought he saw was a victim of a very messy, very loud, and very permanent exit strategy. Onding and win. Her 4th of July's. While everyone else was marinating brisket and arguing over whether to buy sparklers or black cats, the Houston Police Department Homicide Division was about to have their picnic ruined. Rwandis. And the rookie S. Regan. Pogis Twislit. Barnaby. Houston traumatized. Brian closed cases. He was a retired detective sergeant from the Houston Police Department. But retired was a relative term when your phone had the habit of screaming at you just as the first sip of caffeine hit your tongue. On his porch, watching the Houston smog shimmer. Ring, ring. Went. This is Harris, he grumbled. Oine City. Well, not a floater, a dumper. Southeast Houston, across from Jones High. Patrol says it is messy. Onslation sued. Harris sighed. He'd spent 22 years looking at things people weren't supposed to see. He knew the drill. He put on his suit, the death notification suit, and headed out, Ripley said. When he arrived at the scene, he found Michael new guy. Well, new meaning he'd been in homicide for 3 months, which in dog years is about a decade, but in detective years, he was still a puppy. This was Perez's first scene as the lead investigator. Isten spent the morning ironed into his suit provide, hoping the creases of structural integrity for the stress he was feeling. Skuskluffy, waiting. Etai traumatized. Morning, dist stepping over a line of yellow tape that looked like it was struggling to stay upright in the heat. We Sergeant. Perez replied, wiping sweat from his brow. So but. We've got a Jane Doe, late 20s, maybe early 30s, note ID. Multiple gunshot wounds to the head, but honestly, with the hair and the blood, it's like trying to read a map through a blender. Honest. Harris looked at the body. He looked at the grass. He looked at the road. One misanafilid. Mike, Harris said, pointing at the dark smears on the pavement. She didn't die here. Someone pulled a car up, opened the door, and dragged her out like a bag of yesterday's trash. It's a classic Houston dump. Lazy, arrogant, and cruel, with no robbery. Perez asked, pointing to the victim as jewelry. She is still wearing her rings, her necklace. Whoever did this was still looking for a payday. Or traumatized, Harris muttered. Or it's as a message, or it's just a man who thinks he is a god and decided she did not fit in his world anymore. Bright. History, our grace, Jones High School sat there, silent in the summer break. Rokiwi offetais. Every school has cameras. Maybe we get lucky. Maybe the killer is the type of idiot who dumps a body under a motin homcham tamui p lens. Onuwai, Harris said. The idiots are our best friends, Harris said. Intlima. The surveillance cinema or tront long. They didn't, he listened wait long. The school's security team, likely bored out of their minds on a holiday weekend, were happy to help. They huddled in a cramped, air-conditioned booth that smelled of stale popcorn and ozone. Koshi Monetai. There, the technician said, pointing at a grainy monitor. Oyer. Bartently, on the screen. Loiken through, two header-weist. Silent movie. Two headlights through the Houston night. A vehicle stopped right at the spot where the boy would later find the sleeping man. My foldmat. A figure stepped out of the driver's side. Walked around to the passenger side and began a frantic, jerky tug-of-war with something heavy. Orbitize. Look at that. Harris struggling. He's not a big guy. Or she was fighting him even after the end. Ontly, the figure on the screen dragged the mass toward the ditch. A few seconds later, the car sped off, leaving nothing but a shadow in the grass. The small car, Perez noted. Bubble-shaped, like a beetle. A dark Volkswagen Beetle. A getaway that looks like a ladybug, Harris chuckled grimly. That is some high-level criminal tradecraft right there. The next day was July Bontrin Hinning. While the rest of the city was blowing things up for fun, Harris and Perez were headed to the morgue. Often, CIFIS, as the medical examiner's office, Chile's confines of the medical examiner's office. It was a grim business. The doctor pointed to the wounds. Ophinobinis. Stippling, Banner, the doctor said, pointing to the burned particle around the entry wound. This wasn't a sniper shot from across the street. This was close contact. The barrel was practically kissing her skin when the trigger was pulled. Ways asked. Onimat Kubi. The bullet went through and through. We're looking for a weapon, but we don't know the caliber yet. On band. Tron prints, Harris said. Texas keeps a record of every driver's license. If she ever sat for a photo, we'll find her. Onchin chirped. A match. Kumba say. Perez read from the file. 31 years old. No criminal record. This isn't a street kid. This is someone with a life. Obi. The radio star and the sociopath. All Lucy notification. Tarasio. It's a rite of passage for every homicide detective, the kind of experience that leaves a permanent scar on your soul. Moses. He drove to the Ceci, opened the door. She saw the suit. She saw the badge. She saw the look in Perez's eyes. The look of a man who was about to break her world into a million jagged pieces. Kumba, she whispered. Odiferi. Missy, Perez said. Osley, immerse. She wasn't just a victim. She was a force of nature, an immigrant from Sierra Leone, wannabe, Buanik, the one metized, in fault, a mover, a shaker. She hosted an internet radio show where she interviewed hip-hop artists and discussed controversial topics. Hun pores. She leaked out of her pores, in places, her brother said, his voice thick with grief. She did it have a bad bone in her body, and was having trouble with. Perez asked, his pen hovering over his notepad. Ophenamos, in Banon. 2 names. First, David Gabriel, a bitter ex-boyfriend, who allegedly owed her money. Money, Harris knew, was the fuel for half the murders in Houston. Comboltain. Was Leroy Stutz. Was Leroy. With boyfriend though, the mother said. He was on the radio with her sometimes, we said. Kumba drove. A blue Volkswagen Beetle. Offeris T. Perez returned to the station. We have a victim, we have a car, and we have a bitter ex and a jealous current, we decided. To play a little game he liked to call. The murder is right. He brought David Gabriel in for a chat. Old Tinturi. Mot. Here you and Kumba had a falling out over some cash, Harris said, leaning back in his chair. That is a lot of motivation for a late-night drive to South Park. Gabriel scoffed. Kumba had her own money. Maud Day knowed it need to kill her for a couple of bucks. Besides. Maud was at a house party with 24 people. Check the tapes. Check the witnesses. Maud was busy being the life of the party, while someone else was being the end of her life. Gwendon the tightened. Harris checked, clean. He had an alibi as solid as a Texas steak. We saw, which. Abrit frustrated. Which leaves us with Leroy Stutz. On the diem. Bulb. And the gasoline and gala. Bisen, just as they were turning to investigate. Attention to Stutz. A report came in from the arson investigators. The arson, Tex said. Or Beetle, or what is left of it. Wimatize. The car had been found across Southern Holtres University TSU dormitory. It had been torched. But the killer, in his infinite wisdom, had made a classic amateur mistake. He'd rolled up all the windows before dousing the interior with gasoline and throwing a match. Old said, "Oxygen genius." Harris muttered as he inspected the charred remains of the car. The fire started, ate up all the air, and then choked itself out. He did some damage, but he didn't destroy the evidence they found. Blood. A lot of it. They took swabs for DNA. Odimiers. TSUS security footage showed a Buick LeSabre pulling up to the Beetle. A figure got out, rummaged around the Beetle, and then, boom. A big burst of light. The figure ran back to the Buick and sped off. Went to be, Perez said, or a very helpful getaway driver. Wendy traumatized. While they were processing the car, a man named Carlton Turner called. He was a concert promoter who had hosted a party the night of the murder at a warehouse on the southeast side. Couldn't find an ID. Turner said, "There's blood on it. It belongs to Kumba Sese. On to worry." The pieces were starting to fit. The murder happened in a parking lot. The body was dumped in a ditch, and the car was ditched at a university. It was a tour of Houston's less scenic landmarks. Quays and Perez visited the radio station, Style Radio. They met Don Hilliard, the general manager. Kundini Hoyd. Kuma was the real deal, Hilliard said, shaking his head. She had the voice. She had the personality. She was going national. But Leroy was the anchor dragging her down. On the rise. Hilliard explained that Leroy Stutz had been co-hosting with Kumba. But he was the popular. He was jealous of her success. He'd go on rants, degrading women, acting like a thug on the air. On to fire him, Hilliard said. He was jeopardizing everything Kumba built. Rossi said. Harris pulled Leroy Yusio, criminal record. He just have a record. He had a biography of bad decisions. Mike. Harris said. In Morning Chin Chin Mihai, Leroy committed a murder, convicted, sentenced to 45 years. Served 18 before some parole board decided he was rehabilitated. Robbery.